You are listening to the Break Time Tech Talks podcast, a bite-sized tech podcast for busy developers, where we'll briefly cover technical topics, news snippets, and more in short time blocks. I'm your host, Jennifer Reif, an avid developer and problem solver with special interest in data, learning, and all things technology. All right, welcome back. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. So I have a guest on the podcast that I'm going to talk to, and we're just going to discuss either what's going on, what the person's working on, projects, things in the industry, and so on. I am really excited to welcome William Lyon to the podcast. Hi, Will.
Hello.
So Will used to work for Neo4j and then took a little bit of a sabbatical, explored some other things, other projects, other companies, and then has come full circle back to Neo4j recently. I'm really excited to kind of hear how that journey went and the things that he explored and did along the way.
That's right. Yeah, I think I'm less than a month back at Neo4j. This time in a role on the product team. Right, I worked previously with Jen and the team on developer relations for a long time, and then
if you listened to graphstuff.fm, that was all Will's pretty much idea, I think, and he ran and hosted that show for the longest time.
That's right. Yeah, I love that podcast. Is it going to get rebooted? Is there an encore call for Graph Stuff FM?
It has been discussed and surfaced occasionally, but I don't have any insider news to provide right now.
Noted.
So, would you like to just talk about maybe some of the projects you've been working on recently, or things that you did between Neo4j stints? I know you were working on a lot of AI things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I was away from Neo4j for a little over 2 years. I did developer relations at an early startup. I think we were 8 people when I joined, so I was building out the developer relations function there. It was a geospatial analytics startup, which was really interesting. Just ended up not being a great fit for me technology ecosystem wise, which I hadn't really appreciated, I guess, how important I think being passionate about the technology and the technology ecosystem is for developer relations. So that was an interesting learning experience for me. And then I went to go work at another startup called Hypermode, which is doing really interesting things with AI agents and knowledge graphs. So I got back in the graph game there, doing really interesting things with AI as well. And then, that startup folded into some other things, and now I'm back at Neo4j on the product team this time, looking specifically at AI innovation projects. So trying to take some of the learning and observations that I had working in the AI startup ecosystem for a little bit and pair that with what folks are doing with Neo4j, using knowledge graphs for GraphRag, these types of things. What are other interesting things that we could maybe build either into Neo4j or maybe build on top of Neo4j to support developers who want to build with LLMs. Right now, this is mostly, I think, agents, lots of interest in being able to put LLM and AI agents into production, and graphs have several interesting roles to play there. So that's what I'm dipping my feet into now.
Okay, I was going to ask what are kind of your topics that you see as being really key in the industry right now. I know you mentioned agents and knowledge graphs, but are there any other things that you're kind of exploring those avenues as well to integrate?
Yeah, so I think that for folks building AI agents, using knowledge graphs is really important for enabling things like agentic memory. So we see this memory functionality in various agents, but there are actually some really interesting things you can do as you're constructing a knowledge graph from interactions with the agent and the user, and you're using that knowledge graph to build up the agent's memory over time. That can really improve the interactions with the agent. And this is typically what's called episodic memory. But there are other types of agentic memory that are typically thought of as well. Things like procedural memory, which is an area that I'm dipping into now, looking at how, modeling the reasoning, the tool calling steps that go on during an agentic loop, and using a graph to keep track of the different execution paths, the tool calls, the like number of tokens. You also think of this as model traceability, these sorts of things. But this is very much a graph structure. So if we are using Neo4j to build out this like procedural memory graph, how can we then leverage that to support the reasoning phase for the agent, sort of like graph-based reasoning? So that's an area that I think is out there. There's been some research in that area, but I think we're going to see some really interesting implementations of that pretty soon. So that's
Yeah.
another exciting area.
I find it really interesting, actually, that both of the memory pathways, I guess, that you talked about, one was a very real time conversation. Here's what's going on right now in the conversation, and here's all the previous context from this existing conversation. And then the other side of it is actually the, as you said, traceability, the operational end of things, like what has happened over time and what is the process underneath the hood that's going on, and are there ways to optimize that? So I just found it really interesting that one is very real time, almost user focused, customer facing, and the other one is very operational, internal type of work.
Yeah, that's a good observation. The agentic memory area is really interesting because the academic literature is very rich in this area, drawing on things from neuroscience and our understanding of cognition and how like human memory and the human brain works. And there's
Right.
a lot of research that is taking those concepts and applying them to sort of the tooling around AI agents. And so, your observation that, hey, we have short term and long term memory, the mental model that is sort of talked about in the literature maps to the way the human brain works, with differences in short term memory, long term memory, how we have like a model of something, like a model of a coffee cup, right? Like this mug. I have just an understanding of what a mug is, and I can go to that like canonical representation of the thing in my brain, which when I'm reading some of the neuroscience books and trying to understand that, like is really interesting to me, because that's exactly the benefit of a knowledge graph, right? You have like a canonical representation of the thing, the node, and as you go through your interactions with the agent, as you build out the knowledge graph, you're not duplicating every time you think of the coffee cup. You're using that node, that model for it, and that's exactly the same way that sort of memory works in the brain. And so I think that's just like one example where using a knowledge graph for agent memory can be really useful, and sort of maps to some of the research out there.
Yeah, that's true. I guess with graph use cases, the flexible thing about them is you can choose what you're trying to model, and you can model the same entity, for instance, the coffee cup or a mug, and you can model it differently depending on what you're using it for, whether that's a random household item or it's something to hold liquids or it's something else entirely, right?
Totally. Yeah. Like graph data modeling, fundamentally, I think is like this iterative process, but also very dependent on the questions that you're asking of the data, right? And so I think that concept fundamentally applies also in the agentic world, where we're building knowledge graphs for AI memory or graph reasoning, these sorts of things as well. If we're able to sort of apply the domain that we're interested in, or apply the data model that we're interested in during sort of the extraction phase of identifying entities that are relevant for memory during our agent interaction, that's going to give us a much more domain specific and relevant knowledge graph, right, than if we're just trying to sort of construct knowledge graph of every entity that we've talked about in our memories. So I think that's also like a really important piece too, to think about as you're building, sort of AI memory systems, is to think about during that entity extraction phase, like what are the things that I'm talking about in these interactions with the agent. Think about applying a domain to the data model for that, and only I guess the first step would be only create entities and extract things that are relevant for the domain of whatever application you're building. That's a good
Sure.
first step. But ideally, you're able to use some sort of like structured output technique to map the types that you're constructing to the types in your domain application, so that
Right.
you are able to link sort of the canonical representation of the thing that you're talking about. If you're talking about your agent about a coffee mug, if you're able to link that with your, I don't know, your e-commerce inventory internal database, what row in that table the coffee mug is, right? Like if you're able to link those two things, then I think you're going to leverage a lot more value out of building this knowledge graph from your agent interactions, combining that with internal business data. That's like a big power of the graph, combining data and querying across silos, right? That I think gives a lot of value there.
Okay, awesome. I was also going to ask, you'd mentioned it in another conversation that you're working on an AI memory landscape project. And I popped out to it, and it's like this big dashboard with several categories. Could you talk a little bit about the project? Is it something you've built, or is that something that's a wider industry or vendor, something that's been assembled?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I'm in a relatively new role in the product team at Neo4j, and I think during any new role like that, you go through this research phase to try to get the lay of the land, understand the landscape of tooling, open source projects, other vendors, how the pieces fit together. I think is important. And
Sure.
I thought, well, if I'm doing this for me to understand what's going on, the entire AI ecosystem develops so rapidly. There's a lot of interesting research going on just in the AI memory space. I think this is rapidly evolving too, with the like product offerings that are coming out from like some of the model providers, some of the agent frameworks. So there's a lot going on and there's a lot to maintain. And so my first thought was, can I just share and make public my understanding of this for other folks? And then selfishly, secondly, is if I put something together that's useful, could I maybe encourage folks to contribute and help us update it? And so I'm at phase one now, and it's still a work in progress. Maybe by the time the podcast airs, it'll be public, but I think you've seen like the early preview version of this. But yeah, that's really the goal, is just to catalog what are the pieces of the AI agent memory landscape. If I'm a developer and I need to add memory to my agent, if I'm architecting a new project from scratch, what models should I choose, what agent framework, what memory services do I want to manage solution, what are the open source tooling, what are the infrastructure database pieces that have a role in this. So that's really the goal of the AI memory landscape. We'll try to link it in the show notes if we can. And yeah,
Absolutely.
really curious to just have any feedback or contributions from folks in the community too. If there's a project you're aware of that we missed, open a pull request and add it. There's also a blog there for, I want to do like tutorial series, with more sort of examples of showing how different pieces fit together. Just meant to be like a vendor neutral space of just showing how to use different tools in the AI memory ecosystem.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I know for me, just trying to figure out what to use and what all is available out there, you have to move across tons of different surface areas to figure out what's the best thing here, what do I really want here. So having one dashboard, if you will, to showcase it all, where you can pick and choose, oh, this is the right thing, or maybe I want to go down this path first, I think is really super helpful. So I'll definitely add that to the show notes and share that. I know you have to wrap up and head out, but thank you so much for joining me on the podcast and discussing a little bit about what you're working on. And I can't wait to see a lot of the content and things that you work on next.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, and looking forward to maybe chatting again in the future.
Sounds good. All right. Bye.
Cheers.